Hallo, guten Tag. Ich bin Rico Weber vom deutschen SSL-Büro. Ich bin hier mit Jason Kelly, dem Product Manager des neuen SSL Live-Sound-Systems, mit dem wir jetzt hier unterwegs sind. Viele der Features und kreativen Konzepte, die für uns heute selbstverständlich sind, haben das Licht der Welt auf einem SSL-System erblickt. Der Name SSL stand dabei immer als Synonym für hohe Zuverlässigkeit, hervorragenden Sound und intuitive Ergonomie. Traditionell stehen diese Features vor allem für den Broadcast und für den Studiomarkt zur Verfügung. Die neue SSL Live transportiert das auch in die Live-Sound-Anwendung. Dabei stehen die Flexibilität im Umgang und dem Handling der umfangreichen Features im Vordergrund, und deswegen übertragen wir das Ganze jetzt an Jason, der uns einige von diesen Features vorstellen wird. Jason, a lot of the features that the SSL Live introduces is down to the flexibility of the system, and you can probably show us a bit of a few of those new features that it introduces.
Yeah, okay. So we have a huge amount of flexibility within the system, not just with the audio processing, but also with the user interface. The console itself is completely configurable from 192 paths. Those 192 paths can be configured as inputs, outputs, groups, masters in pretty much any combination. Once we've created our console, we can then interface with it using two multi-touch screens, the fader tiles and the channel tile. Generally, with the console, all of the processing can be accessed in three different ways. One way that we can interface is using the touchscreen itself. So we can double tap, open up a detail view, and then select and adjust parameters using the touchscreen itself. Now, because it's multi-touch, we can, for instance, select an EQ band and adjust the Q using a pinch action, like this. We can do the same thing with compression. So we can adjust the threshold, ratio, and then the knee. As well as the touchscreen interface, we also have the ability to control the processing on the channels using the assignable controls. So if we go back to the EQ, I can now adjust the gain of each of our bands of EQ, the frequency, and the Q as well. If we select frequency, I can also adjust the high and low pass filters. Pretty much every function that I can do on the screen, I can do using the assignable controls, but I can also use the channel tile to do exactly the same thing. The channel tile has select buttons for the different sections of the processing on the channel. So if I select EQ, I can adjust all of the same parameters using the controls around the screen with the high and low pass filters underneath, for example, with the EQ. I have my in buttons, which are replicated on the channel tile and also on the fast controls. So those are the three ways that I can interface with my channels. I can select channels from the tile underneath the screen, and I can also bring any of the three tiles to the screen by hitting the screen button. So all of my channels are accessible very quickly and very easily. I can also bring these parameters onto the faders using the flip function. So if I select an auxiliary send, I can then flip that onto the faders and mix from the faders directly to that output. On the channels, we have the same processing on inputs and outputs. The mix buses are completely configurable, so I can have the required number of auxiliaries, groups, masters that I need. Once I've created those, I can then access them using these 6 buttons on the touch screen. Underneath, in the center section, we have an overview of that particular selected parameter. So I can see from here that the kick channel is switched on for mixes 1 and 3, for example. Underneath, I have an overview of what the assignable controls are doing, and underneath that we have the select buttons for the channel processing. So I can select EQ, I can see an overview of the EQ across all of the channels on the tile. Double tap, this gives me the detail view, and now I can control that in the 3 ways that we've already seen. With the EQ, we have a number of different filters that we can choose from. So band 1 can be shelving with Q, constant Q, or the traditional legacy EQ from SSL. The mid bands also have some choices. We can have constant Q parametric, the legacy SSL parametric EQ, but we can also assign a notch filter, and the notch filter also has Q as well. The high and low pass filters also have different slope selections. With the compressor limiter, we again have a number of selections. Again, we can adjust either from the screen or from the assignable controls or from the channel tile. We have selectable filters for the compressor, which are high and low pass types. We have a peak or RMS sensing mode for the compressor, and all of the compressors have a tube emulation feature. In this part of the screen, we can adjust the attack, release, and our compressor also has a hold function. With the gate, we can do exactly the same adjustments. I can adjust the gain reduction from the screen, and my attack, release, and hold functions are here. Again, I have a separate set of filters for the gate. We have peak sensing or RMS sensing, and we can also turn the gate into an expander. Both the compressor and the gate can be keyed from an external source, and this can be patched from pretty much anywhere on the entire console. The panning function is very easy to use. Again, we can use the assignable controls or the screen. If we select a stereo channel, we now have a width control and pan function. On every process channel, we have up to 2 seconds of delay, and this can be configured to show time or distance. But one of the unique features about the SSL Live console is that every process channel has an all-pass filter. This allows us to correct phase differences between multiple channels. It's a very useful tool in the live environment, particularly for sources that are using multiple microphones, such as pianos, bass guitar, bass DI, kick drums with 2 microphones, snare drum, etc. It's unique to the SSL Live console. No other console has this ability on a channel by channel basis. Every channel has 2 insert points, and once we insert an effect from our effects rack, we can access that effect directly from the channel itself and we don't need to go to the effects rack to access that channel. As we've already seen, we can access all of our mix buses from the channel overview, and we can also assign mute groups and VCAs. All of the channels can be color-coded. We also have the iconics feature, which allows us to associate more visual aspects. Instead of looking at just names on channels, we can associate images with those channels. And another one of the unique features of the SSL Live console is that we can also manipulate the sequence of the processing within the channel. So by muting the channel, I can now move the processing blocks around just by dragging and dropping them. So if I would like to compress before I EQ, I can move the compressor section to be pre-channel EQ, and I can also move the gate to be at the top of the channel, for instance. I can pretty much move any of the channel processing wherever I would like to put them, and I can do that on a channel by channel basis on inputs and outputs. The way that we interact with the channels is by using the fader tiles. Each one of the fader tiles is independent of the others, so I can assign any 5 layers to each tile, and within each layer we can have 5 banks of faders. These can be configured by going to the setup menu and going to the layer manager. So here I can select my source tile and my destination tile underneath, and if we want to create a bank of faders, we can do that by selecting a bank. So now we select the channels from the top section. So for instance, if I want to have 4 drum channels, I can drag and drop those. I can then have a drum reverb return. I can have some VCAs. And I could even put one of my master outputs to the speaker system here as well. So I've now created a layer of or bank of faders. I can put any type of channel on any fader at any time. This is now ready to go. If I have the same channels on a different tile, then I can adjust those at the same time. So I can lay the console out pretty much however I want. I can dedicate a tile to inputs, to VCAs, to outputs, or I can have any combination of tiles that I want. This gives me very flexible access to all of my channels. I can have sequential layouts, which is basically what the console creates for you as we configure it. But then we can go and customize every bank and every layer. Again, we can color code as much as we wish, and we can obviously name and configure the banks and the layers however we want. The effects rack on the console has 96 slots or instances that we can load effects into. At the moment we have 30 effects that you can choose from, and you can have as many replicas of the same effect as many times as you would like to have them. These can be either set up as effects which use send and return functions from outputs on the console, or can be inserted directly into any channel. The interface for these effects was specifically designed for a touchscreen interface, but we can also bring these parameters down onto the channel faders if we wish, by using the flip function. So I can control that effect from the faders as well. So this gives you a brief overview of the SSL Live console. There is a lot more to tell you about, a lot more to show you, so hopefully we will see some of you at the Roadshow we'll be doing in Germany over the next 2 weeks. Thank you very much.